In this brand new series, and for the first time publicly, you'll hear a word-for-word recreation of Lucy Letby's defence. For 5 days, Lucy Letby was in the witness box where she was questioned at length by Benjamin Myers KC in the hopes of establishing a defence concerning the accusations against her. The following video has been made possible by the purchasing of court-approved transcripts, further details of which can be found in the video description box below. What you'll hear next is Lucy Letby's evidence in chief. This took place at Manchester Crown Court back in May 2023. Miss Letby, would you give the court your full name, please?
Yes, Lucy Letby.
And what's your date of birth, Miss Letby?
The 4th of January, 1990.
So you're now 33 years old?
Yes.
In the period that we're looking at in the most detail in this case, between June 2015 through to June 2016, you were 26 years old.
That's right, yes.
Which part of the country were you born in, Miss Letby?
Herefordshire.
I want you to tell us a little bit about that and becoming a nurse first. That's the first thing I'm going to ask you about. Are your family from Herefordshire?
Yes, they are, yes.
Whereabouts in Herefordshire did you grow up? Not the precise address, but the area.
Within Hereford city centre itself.
And who did you grow up with in your house?
It's just myself and my mum and dad.
And did you go to school locally?
Yes.
Where did you go to college?
I went to the local sixth form college.
When was it that you first knew you wanted to be a nurse?
I've always wanted to work with children, but it was towards the end of secondary school that I thought I wanted to do nursing, and then picked A-level subjects that would best support that career.
All right. Did you have to go to university to study nursing?
Yes.
Is that something new for someone in your family?
Yes, I was the first person in the family to go to university, yes.
Where did you do your nursing degree?
At the University of Chester.
And can you help us? How long is the course that you take to become a nurse?
It's a 3-year degree programme.
And do you spend all of it in the university, or are bits of it spent out in hospitals?
It's 50-50. Part of it is theory-based at the university, and then you have numerous placements throughout that time in different clinical areas to give you experience of different areas of nursing.
Did you ever get any familiarity with the Countess of Chester before you went to work there?
Yes, the majority of my placements, clinical placements, were at the Countess of Chester.
And any particular unit on the Countess of Chester?
Yes, either the children's ward or the neonatal unit.
When did you qualify as a Band 5 nurse, Miss Letby?
September 2011.
And does that coincide with the end of your degree, or was there some further training you had to do to become a Band 5?
No, that was the end of my degree training.
Over the period of 2015 to 2016, you know we're looking at a number of babies in this indictment, and you understand that, don't you?
Yes.
There's 17 of them.
Yes.
But could you put a figure on the number of babies you cared for over that 12-month period?
Probably hundreds.
Hundreds?
Yes.
And did you care for them?
Yes.
Did you ever do anything that was meant to hurt any of them?
No. I only ever did my best to care for them.
Did you ever want to hurt any baby you looked after?
No, that's completely against everything that being a nurse is. I'm there to help and to care, not to harm.
All right. I want to ask you next about the period, in fact, after you were removed from clinical duties. So we're looking at the period in July 2016 when you were moved away from clinical duties. Why did you think you were being put in a non-clinical role that July?
That there'd been an increased mortality rate on the unit, and as a result, numerous members of staff were having to go through a competency check and redo their competencies, and that would be starting with myself.
And how did you come to believe that is what was happening?
That's what I was told.
And who were you told that by?
By management within the hospital and the executive team.
That you were going to be undergoing training or testing in your competencies?
Yes.
Is it something you had volunteered to do?
No.
Is it something you were keen to do?
No.
How did you feel when you were removed from clinical duties and were told that your competencies were going to be checked like this?
I was devastated.
Why were you devastated?
Because I've always prided myself on being very competent, and the fact that potentially I hadn't been competent in something really, really affected me, and to be taken away from the job that I loved, it was very difficult.
When you say it really affected you, could you convey to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury the extent of that when you say it really affected you?
It was life-changing in that moment. I was taken away from the support system that I had on the unit. I was then put into a non-clinical role that I didn't enjoy. I had to pretend to a lot of people that it was a voluntary process, which it wasn't. And from a self-confidence point of view, it made me question everything about myself.
Right. When was it, so far as you can recall, you first discovered that you were being held responsible for harm to babies on the unit or their deaths?
Not until the September of 2016.
What event was it in September 2016 that led you to discovering that you were being held responsible for deaths of babies?
I received a letter from the Royal College of Nursing in which they had been informed that actually the true reason for my redeployment was because I was being held responsible.
We're thinking about, do you remember roughly what date that would have been that you received that letter? Not the precise day, but maybe which month?
It was September.
September 2016?
Yes.
And what was going on that meant you received that letter at about that time? What was taking place or about to start?
So I was looking at putting in a grievance procedure.
About what?
About how I'd been redeployed from the unit and the information that I'd been given in relation to that.
Did you have any idea how many babies you were being held responsible for harming or for their deaths?
No.
How did it make you feel when you received the news that you were being held responsible?
Well, it was sickening. I couldn't believe it.
I want you to describe how best you can. It may not be easy, but describe as best you can what it felt like to have that being said about you, Miss Letby, if you can.
I mean, it was devastating. I don't think you can be accused of anything worse than that. And yeah, I was just devastated.
Well, you tell us how it affected you. That might be another way of looking at this. What was the effect of this on you? What happened?
I just changed as a person. My mental health deteriorated, and I felt very isolated from my friends and family on the unit, and...
Just pausing there. When you say isolated, of course, you'd been removed from the neonatal unit. Had you had friends on the neonatal unit?
Yes, a lot of friends. We were a very supportive unit as well. Regardless of whether we were personal friends, we were a very supportive nursing team.
When you moved on to... Sorry to interrupt you.
It's okay.
When you moved to a non-clinical role and you were being told that you'd undergo the competency testing, were you able to explain that to other people on the unit?
No. So at that time, the hospital advised me not to communicate with anybody on the unit and to sort of go with the pretense that it was a voluntary secondment. And it was identified at that time that there were 2 or 3 friends that I would be able to speak to, but otherwise I was not to have contact with anyone on the unit.
You say it was identified there were 2 or 3 friends you could speak to. Who were they?
It was Nurse E, Dr. A, and Mina Lapalainen.
Nurse E,
Yes.
Dr. A,
Yes.
and Mina Lapalainen.
Yes.
You'd said that you'd felt isolated. You had been describing how it felt when you learned you were being blamed for a death or deaths. You made a reference to your mental health. Did you go to and seek any assistance with how it affected you, mentally speaking?
I did, yes. I went to my GP. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I just had a complete change in my whole life. And I was starting on some antidepressants at that point, which I remain on now.
So did the GP put you on to antidepressants?
Yes.
If it doesn't seem too obvious a question, what's that for? What were you given them for? What state were you in?
They diagnosed me with depression and anxiety at that time.
And you say you've remained on that medication?
Yes.
And are you receiving that now?
Yes.
Do you take any other medication at the moment?
I also take medication to help with sleep, yes. I am unable to sleep without medication.
How bad did the negative feelings get so far as you're concerned about yourself? How bad?
There were times when I didn't want to live.
And what did you want to do? What did it make you think of doing?
To myself,
Yes.
I thought of taking my own life.
Had you done anything wrong?
No.
Why did you think of taking your own life? Somebody might ask.
Because of what was being inferred.
How hard had you worked to become a nurse?
Very hard.
How much did it matter to you?
My job was my life. It was everything.
How did it feel to have that taken away and be held responsible for the deaths of babies you'd cared for?
I can't put that into words. It's just, my whole world just stopped.
Have you ever been able to recover your kind of mental ease after all this started?
No, I think it's just progressively got worse.
How hard is it to cope with what you're being accused of?
It's very difficult.
If you think back to the young woman you were when you were 25 or 26, before you were taken off the unit, before you were being blamed for what happened, are you the same person in yourself now as you were then?
No, I think it's completely changed everything. A lot about me and my life, about the hopes that I had for the future. Everything is just gone.
Where have you been living since November 2020? What type of place?
So I've been remanded in prison since that time.
That's since your third arrest in November 2020?
Yes, I've been in 4 different prisons since then.
I'm not going to ask you the locations of any prison, Miss Letby. I don't invite you to do that. But before that first arrest in July 2018, had you ever been in trouble with the police before for anything?
No.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about the experience of arrest and prison. When I do that, I make it absolutely clear that we are grateful to the officers at court and those who bring you to and from court, and the cell staff for the care you have received. And that's the same for you, isn't it, Miss Letby?
It is, yes.
So we're just looking at the effect of events on you. There is nothing at all critical about the people caring for you.
No.
And we are grateful for that. You were arrested for the first time on July the 3rd, 2018.
Yes.
Had you ever experienced anything like that before?
No.
Are you able to just describe in simple terms the impact of your arrest and that process on you? Let me start with this. How did you know the police were coming that day? What's the first you knew?
When there was a loud knocking at the door at 6 o'clock in the morning by the police.
You were at home in 41 Westbourne Road, Chester. Is that right?
I was, yes.
Were you on your own there, as it happens?
No, my father was staying with me at that point, so he was there as well.
Had you any idea the police were coming that day?
No, none at all.
So when they came, what happened with you?
They told me that I was being arrested for multiple counts of murder and attempted murder, and then they quickly handcuffed me and took me away.
All right. And you were taken to a police station, is that right?
In my pyjamas, yes.
And over the next 3 days, you were interviewed at various times?
Yes.
And we've asked the Estonia about that. Again, the way that was done is just the way the police deal with it, and that's not critical of them for the process they followed. When that process had ended after the 3 days of interviews, were you released from police custody?
Yes, I was, yes.
On bail?
Yes.
And did you have to live anywhere in particular after that?
Yes. As a part of my bail conditions, I wasn't allowed to return to my house in Chester, so from that point on, I then lived with my parents back in Hereford.
Is that where you were living when we come to the time of your second arrest on the 10th of June 2019?
It is, yes.
And on that occasion, did you know the police were coming that day?
No, it was a mirror image of the time before. It was just loud banging and knocking at the door, and we opened it to find the police there.
It may be difficult taking your mind back to these things, Miss Letby, but so that the jury understand, what was the impact on you, the banging and the being arrested again, if you're able to say?
It was just the scariest thing I've ever been through. It not only happened once, it happened twice and then a third time. And it's just traumatised me.
The third time was on the 10th of November, 2020.
Yes.
And that's the time after which you weren't actually released. You were kept in prison.
Yes.
And you've been in prison since then?
I have, yes.
When you say it traumatised you, we've heard that you're on medication. So we can understand, has it left you sensitive to particular things? So the jury understands certain things that affect you in certain ways?
Yes. The biggest way it's affected me is just I'm very sensitive to any noise, any unexpected change or new people. I'm easily startled, easily frightened of things.
Were you like that before the arrests began?
No, not at all.
And have you received psychological support in prison and at court as we've been going forwards?
I have, yes. I've been diagnosed with PTSD in direct relation to the arrests, yes.
Right. And so far as being at court is concerned, again, we're grateful to all those who care for you and bring you to and from court. But without going into the business of locations, how long is the trip to court each morning for you?
It's usually around an hour and a half each way.
And the same time in the evening?
It is, yes.
What time do you normally get up before you come to court?
About 5:30.
Where do you have your breakfast?
I have my breakfast when I arrive here at court. We leave about 6:30 in the morning and I eat when I arrive here. I also get quite bad travel sickness, so I wait and eat my breakfast when I've arrived here.
What time do you get back to the prison in the evenings, as a general rule?
Usually around 7 p.m.
We've all seen various notes that were taken by the police that you had written. You know the notes I'm referring to, don't you?
Yes.
We're going to look at a number of them as we're going through your evidence, Miss Letby. Not all in one go, but at various points. But just to help the jury with this in general, are you the sort of person who writes things down in notes, on notes?
Yes, it's something I've done my whole life. That is my way of dealing with things, just day to day. That is what I've always done. I've always written things down.
And do you throw them away? Do you always throw them away when you've written things down?
No, I never throw anything away. I have difficulties throwing things away. Everything is just kept.
Right. Let's look at the note which we've got in the images the prosecution gave us. It's the prosecution images, page 18. We'll see if Mr. Murphy can help us with that. We'll look at a close-up in a moment, but I'm going to ask you some questions about the note that's on the right-hand side of this page, Miss Letby. Were the notes like this in your house, or is it just how they've been arranged for the purposes of photographing it?
No, that's how it's been arranged.
So the police have set it out so we can see it for the photograph?
Yes.
Do you know when it was? Can we go to page 19, in fact, Mr. Murphy, so we can see the note more clearly? Thank you. We'll have a look at this in a moment, Miss Letby. But do you recall when it was you would have written this? What period of time?
After my removal from the unit in 2016 and prior to my arrest this time.
Do you know any precise date when you wrote it?
No.
We're going to have a look at what's written here. Look at the top if you would. It says, not good enough. Yes? Why have you written not good enough and underlined it?
I think that's the overwhelming thought and feelings that I had about myself at that point, that I wasn't good enough.
And why did you think you weren't good enough?
Because of the way people had made me feel.
Had you actually done anything wrong to hurt any babies?
No.
How were you feeling because of the things that people were saying about you?
I felt an immense responsibility. I thought that I'd been incompetent or done something wrong that harmed children.
When we're looking at the notes, is it the case you've always written everything we see on them on one occasion? Or are they sometimes written at different times, bits of the notes?
It can be both.
Right, we're going to track across this. It says on the left, there are no words. That seems to carry on the left-hand side. I can't breathe, I can't focus. Perhaps you could read it, Miss Letby? The objection isn't to my learned friend reading the words. It's to him interpreting that one bit that follows the other. I'd rather the witness said which bit was written by. That's fine. There are no words. What would come after there are no words when you look at that, Miss Letby?
The text to the left-hand side. I can't breathe, I can't focus.
Right.
Overwhelming fear and panic.
And what's that describing when it says, there are no words, I can't breathe, I can't focus, overwhelming fear and panic?
That's how I felt about my life at that moment in time.
Under that it says, I haven't done anything wrong. Why does it say I haven't done anything wrong?
Because I haven't done anything wrong.
Who are you writing this note for or to?
It wasn't to anyone, it was just me processing my thoughts. It was never meant to be read by anyone.
Can you just help us with why it says police investigation on the left-hand side under that?
Because I knew that ultimately the worst case scenario would be that the police would be involved, and that was something that had been threatened by the hospital.
Why under that does it say, if you can help us, slander, discrimination?
That's how I felt about the trust and the hospital. That's how I felt they were towards me, that it was slander and discrimination.
And what was slander and discrimination?
The allegations.
Under that it says, all getting too much. What follows on from all getting too much when we look at the note, if anything follows on?
Everything's taken over my life. I think it's everyone, and I feel very alone and scared.
All right. Is that how you were feeling?
Yes.
I want to look across to the right-hand side, if we could, for the time being, reading down the right. I'm an awful person. I pay every day for that right now. You tell me if I read anything incorrectly, by the way.
Yes.
Why are you saying, I'm an awful person, I pay every day for that right now?
Because at that time I did feel that I must be an awful person to have made any mistakes that had harmed anyone, and that I was paying the price for that by what had happened to me.
And what had happened to you at this point, as best you can remember?
That I'd been taken away from the job that I loved and accused of things that I just hadn't done.
Underneath it says, I'll never have children or marry. Can you read the next bit? I'll never
know what it's like to have a family.
Right. Why were you saying that?
Because at that time I couldn't see any future for myself. I couldn't imagine what my life was going to be or that I'd ever have a future.
This is all your handwriting, do you agree?
It is, yes.
Why have you written no hope at an angle towards the side of the note on the right-hand side?
Because there were times when I didn't have any hope. My whole situation felt hopeless at times.
And at that same kind of angle, a bit below that, it says despair. Can you see that?
Yes.
And what is that describing?
Again, one of the emotions that I was feeling at that time.
Just to the left of despair, it says, what does it say? Hate myself so much for what this has. And then it's hard to read. We can perhaps scroll down a bit there. Let's see if that follows through with anything. Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Does it follow with anything, or does it just run out at what this has?
I believe it just runs out there, I think.
It says, hate myself so much for what this has. And then we can see a circle heavily in ink and the word hate in it.
Yes.
Why did you say, hate myself so much for what this has? Why did you say that in the note?
Because at that time I did hate myself.
You've said in the note, I haven't done anything wrong. So people might think, well, how do you hate yourself if you haven't done anything wrong?
Because I was made to feel that I had done something wrong. So potentially I thought I had been incompetent in some way.
What kind of mental state were you in at the time you were writing this note?
Not good at all.
Had you been to see the doctor by this time, or do you not know?
I couldn't say, but throughout that period my mental health was poor.
How well were you coping with the situation you were in?
I did my best, but it was difficult in the circumstances, with the isolation that I felt, and yeah, it was difficult.
We know you were arrested in July 2018. How long a period was this kind of thing going on for, and these sort of thoughts going on for?
2 years.
Carry on looking across to the left-hand side again now, following from where it says, can you see, how can I get through it? Do you see that, Miss Letby?
Yes.
How can I get through it? What's directly under that, please? Could you read the next?
How will things ever be like they were?
Then if we carry on the left-hand side, it says, I don't deserve to live. Is that what it says?
Yes.
Then does it say, I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough?
Yes.
Was there anything that follows on from that? Because I'm not good enough, does it stop or does it carry on?
I'm not good enough to care for them and I'm a horrible, evil person.
Right. When you say kill them on purpose, does that mean you've gone and done something intentionally to harm them and kill them?
No.
What are you meaning when you say, I killed them on purpose because I'm not good enough to care for them?
That I hadn't been good enough and I'd in some way failed in my duties and my competencies.
Why did you think you hadn't, or you might not have been good enough?
Because that was the suggestion throughout, that I had to redo my competencies, that I'd been removed from the unit. I felt that I'd done something wrong. That was what was insinuated to me, that my competencies had to be rechecked.
It says, I don't deserve mum and dad.
Yes.
And then, world is better off. Is that without me?
Yes.
What's the bit that follows that, without me?
That says, it mentions my cousins.
Is that one sentence, or is that different things?
No, I've written there, I don't deserve mum and dad and my cousins, and I think world is better off without me is separate to that.
So you say you don't deserve your mum or your dad or your cousins, and you have also said the world is better off without you.
Yes.
And it says at the bottom, I am evil, I did this. Why did you say that?
Because I felt at the time that if I'd done something wrong and I didn't know that I had done that, I must be such an awful, evil person if I'd made mistakes and not known.
But we've seen at the top of the note, the actual heading of it underlined is not good enough. So what did you believe had happened, or you'd done, or might have done?
That somehow I'd been incompetent and that I'd done something wrong which had led to affecting those babies.
Just looking on the right-hand side at an angle, it says panic, fear, lost. Do you see that?
Yes.
What's that describing?
That was how I was feeling.
Under hate, it says, I did this. Can you see I did this?
Yes.
What do you mean when the note says, I did this?
That I felt I must be responsible in some way.
You've also written, why me? If you're able to, can you help us with why it says, why me, if you can?
Because I didn't understand why it was happening to me. I thought I'd always been competent. I'd always done my best. I couldn't understand why it was happening to me.
Looking back on this now, as much as you can, how were you coping with the situation you were in at the time you wrote this note?
I think, looking back on it now, I was really struggling. This is a way of me expressing everything that I felt at that time that I wasn't able to say to anyone else.